Hi, this tutorial is to show you how do you actually create cards in Bootstrap 4. And what is card? This is what I mean by cards. For your information, there are three CSS classes that controls how cards look like in Bootstrap 4. And they are card-group, card-deck, and card-columns. These three classes simply controls how the cards are being laid out on the screen. The one that you see in front of you now is what you call cards that uses the class called card-deck. As you can see, card-deck is where the display of each card there is a spacing between them. For card-group, there will be no spacing between them, while columns means they all display from top to bottom. So let's go to the code now to see how we can create cards using Bootstrap 4. As you can see from the display just now, I am supposed to create another row between the first and the last row of this page. So what I do now is that I create a new row here using the div tag and uses a class called row. So now I have created a new row over here. And once I'm in this new row, as usual, I will have to create a column inside of it. So let's say I just use col-lg-12. So now within this column, then only I create or put in the cards. Now from the example that we see just now, this is a type of group of cards that are being styled using the class called card-deck. So how do we group the cards together now? We group them by adding another div now, and this div make use of the class called card-deck. Now within this div, then only I put in all my individual cards. So to create a new card, you use div class equals to card. It is actually very easy to remember their names. It's very direct. So the next thing that you see after you created the card is that you need to put in the content of your card. So you can put in the content of your card by creating this tag here, div, that uses the class called card body. So this is the place where you put in the content of your card. Usually there are three main classes that you can use for content. One is the card title, the other one is a card text, and one more is for the links. So now I'm going to show you how we can do that here. Okay, here what I do is that I will create a heading first. Maybe I call it heading 3. And this heading I will make use of the class. Since this is a heading, right? So I will first use the class called card title. Basically what the class contains is actually how the heading 3 is being styled. You can actually create your own style and not to use card title. It's up to you. But these are the default styles being provided by Bootstrap 4. So Let's say my heading, I call it cut 1. And then the next thing is the content itself. Usually content or the body text, I use paragraph. And when you use this in the cut, the class that you use here, if you use a built-in class, is called cut dash text. Then only you put in your content. Okay, maybe I just simply copy some content over. Maybe I do not want it to be so long. I just make it shorter. And then maybe I will also show you how do you create or a link within the card. As usual, we create link using this tag, and we add in the link here by using the word href. At this moment, I have no, I'm not going to link it to anywhere, so I'm just going to put in hashtag here, and maybe I call it as card link. And the class that you can use here, if you want to use the default style provided by Bootstrap, is that you use the class called card-link. And then we save our file and try to preview how it look like first. So this is how it look like for now. We are going to edit some more here later on. So let's go back to the code again. So before I have this, what you call column for the cards, maybe I will add in another column for my heading of this section. So I call it class equals to col-lg-12 again, and maybe I put here popular food. And if I want it to go center, what I can do is I just put in text center. And then when I save now and I go back to preview my page, maybe I'll just make it as a heading first, h2 maybe. Then only I preview my page. So this is how my page will look like now. So my card starts from here and ends here. Why is it so? Because I have only one card at this moment. So that's why it will take up the whole width of my column. So again, we go back to our code to make some add more cards to it. So what I can do now is, since I have already one card here, I can just simply duplicate them. I'll duplicate this code here. Maybe I put 4 here, and I save it. Then I preview my page again. This is how it looks like now. So we have 4 cards here. So maybe now I will continue to add a margin here, bottom margin, and then there will be some padding over here. I change the word here to cut 2, 3, and 4, and then add 2 more cuts to this cut tag and see what will happen. So now I go back to my code here. Maybe for this h2 here, I will add in some top and bottom padding. So in Bootstrap 4, you know that we can use the class called py dash something. Okay, let's say maybe I press boot 2 here, and then here I will change the name of the text here to cut to tray 4, and then at the same time I mentioned that I need to have margin. So what I do now is I go to my card here and add in a margin. So if I want to have a top and bottom margin, I use my. Again, maybe I use a value 2, and I copy this style to the rest of them. And then I add 2 more cards. And this is called cut 5 and 6. And then I save my file and preview my page again. So this is how the page will look like now. As you notice, the more cards that we have, the width of each card will become even smaller. If this is not what you want, then we have to limit the width of each card by setting a minimum width to each of the cards here. So let's go back to our code. So we can actually set the minimum width by going to our CSS file and create a style that set a minimum width of a specific size that you want. In my CSS file here, I have done a style called cut-size, and this set a minimum width of 250 pixels. So I'm going to use this for my cuts. So I just copy here and go back to my cut and set all my cuts to have a minimum width of 250 pixels. And now we save our file and preview our page again. So this is how the page looks like. As you can see, we have 6 cards over here with the minimum width of 250 pixel wide. However, on my screen over here, I could only view 4 cards per row. The remaining 2 cards will be dropped to the next row. When this happens, the width of my cut 5 and 6 will be different as compared to the rest of the cuts. This is because when we put things or when we put cuts into cut deck, the width of each cut will depend on the space that we have to hold all of them. So for this row here, for this part of my page over here, I have only 2 cuts. So it will divide the space available here between these 2 cuts only. So let's say if we do not want to have this kind of design, we want to have all the cuts to have the same width. What can we do? We can actually do this by putting each of these cuts into a separate column. For example, let's say if I want to have 4 cuts per row, what happened is that I can actually create 4 columns here and then another 4 columns at the bottom. How do we do that? I will show it to you in part 2 of this tutorial.